Poor cleaner is replaced by younger woman in mansion, but a billionaire saw everything and did something that shocked everyone. Comment and rate my story from 0 to 10. Your opinion is very important, and subscribe to my channel to support my work. I'm counting on your help. Water trickled across the white marble floor as the 30-year-old cleaner scrubbed every corner of the imposing mansion with precise, silent movements. Her calloused hands gripped the cloth firmly, removing any trace of dust from the mahogany furniture that cost more than she would earn in a lifetime. The morning sun streamed through the massive picture windows, creating golden reflections on the spotless surfaces she'd maintained for 5 long years. Her brown eyes, tired but determined, scanned every detail as she worked. The routine was always the same. Wake up at 5 a.m., drop her 4-year-old daughter off at the elderly neighbor's house, who watched the little girl for a few bucks, take 2 packed buses to reach her employer's mansion in the wealthiest part of the city. Her simple but striking beauty went unnoticed by the residents of the house, who treated her like a piece of furniture, invisible and replaceable. The little one she left behind every day looked only 2 years old, due to the malnourishment that marked her thin face and eyes too big for her fragile body. The cleaner knew that every cent of her salary went towards the child's food and basic care, leaving little for herself. Her hair, always pulled back in a tight bun, hid the natural shine of her brown strands, and her plain clothes disguised a body that had once been fuller, before the deprivations of single motherhood. That morning, something felt different in the air. The lady of the house, a 40-year-old woman with perfectly coiffed blonde hair and designer clothes, walked through the house with harder steps than usual. Her high heels echoed on the marble floor like hammers hitting cold metal. The cleaner continued her work, trying to become even more invisible, an instinct she had developed over the years. The sound of the lady of the house's harsh voice broke the morning silence, like an unexpected thunderclap. "You! Come here!" The words carried a coldness that made the cleaner's stomach clench. She dropped the cleaning cloth on the coffee table and approached with slow steps, keeping her eyes lowered as she always did when summoned. 5 years is long enough," said the lady of the house, examining her perfectly manicured nails as she spoke. "I need someone younger, more energetic. Someone who can help at the parties we throw here. You're no longer what we need." The words fell like heavy stones on the cleaner's chest, each syllable echoing in her mind like a funeral bell. The world seemed to stop for a moment. 5 years of dedicated work, always arriving on time, cleaning every corner of that house as if her own family lived there. 5 years of respectful silence, never complaining about unpaid overtime, enduring disrespectful comments without ever retaliating. All of that vanishing in a matter of seconds. "I've already hired a replacement," continued the lady of the house with cruel indifference. "A 20-year-old girl, pretty, who will know how to handle our guests better. You have until the end of the day to gather your things and leave." The tone was final, with no room for pleas or negotiations. Tears began to well up in the cleaner's eyes, but she held them back with all the strength she could muster. She couldn't cry there, not in front of that woman who had already shown that she had not a shred of compassion. She thought of her daughter, the rent due next week, the nearly empty refrigerator at home. How was she going to explain to the child that there would be no dinner again? "I understand, ma'am," she managed to murmur with a choked voice, giving a slight bow before turning to fetch her few belongings. Her legs trembled as she walked towards the closet where she kept her personal cleaning products and the worn-out coat she wore on cold days. It was at that moment that he appeared. The 30-year-old billionaire, heir to the family empire, descended the marble staircase with firm steps. His movie star looks drew attention wherever he went. Neatly cut dark hair, deep blue eyes like the ocean, an athletic build that perfectly filled the tailored suits he wore. Women sighed as they saw him walk down the street, but he rarely paid attention to those admiring glances. He had grown up in that mansion, knew every corner, every employee. The cleaner had always been a constant and silent presence, someone he respected for her dedicated work. Upon witnessing the humiliating scene of the firing, his blue eyes narrowed and an expression of discomfort took over his handsome face. "What's going on here?" he asked, directing his gaze from his mother to the cleaner, who was holding a small bag with her belongings, tears finally escaping silently down her flushed cheeks of shame. The lady of the house sighed impatiently, as if it were too obvious to explain. "I'm letting her go. I need someone more suitable for our current needs." Her voice carried the arrogance of someone who had never had to worry about money or the consequences of their decisions on the lives of other people. The young billionaire felt a surge of anger growing in his chest. There was something deeply wrong with that situation, something that touched a part of him that had always been bothered by social injustices. His eyes met the cleaner's for a brief moment, and he saw a wounded dignity that disturbed him in an unexpected way. The impulse that took over the billionaire was stronger than any logic or social convention. Without thinking twice, he addressed the cleaner, who was walking towards the door with faltering steps, carrying her wounded dignity like a heavy burden on her stooped shoulders. "Wait," he said, making her stop in the middle of the marble hallway. His voice had a firmness that she had never heard before, different from the polite but distant tone he had always used the few times they had crossed paths in the house. "You have experience with organization and detail, isn't that right?" She turned slowly, confused by the unexpected question. Her eyes, red from holding back tears, met his again, and this time she couldn't look away. "Yes, sir. I've always been very careful with every task. I have an investment firm downtown," he continued, completely ignoring the disapproving look of his mother, who was watching the scene with growing irritation. "I need someone to take care of organizing documents, filing, things like that. The salary is 3 times what you were making here." The world seemed to spin around the cleaner. 3 times more? That would mean being able to buy medicine for her daughter, maybe even take her to a private doctor. It would mean not having to choose between paying the rent or buying food. It would mean dignity. I don't have any office experience, sir," she stammered, her voice trembling between hope and the fear of dreaming. "I only know how to clean, organize physical things. I don't understand important papers about business." He took a step forward, and for the first time she could smell the masculine cologne he was wearing, an expensive fragrance that seemed to envelop her like an invisible shield. "You'll learn. I know determined people when I see one. You can start on Monday." The lady of the house could no longer contain herself. "Have you lost your mind? She's just a cleaner. She doesn't have the education to work in a serious company. She'll embarrass the family name." The billionaire's blue eyes turned to his mother with a coldness she had rarely seen. "My company, my decisions, and dignity has nothing to do with profession." The words came out like sharp blades, cutting off any attempt at discussion. 2 weeks later, the cleaner found herself in a completely different world. The mirrored building in the financial district was imposing, with its dozens of floors reflecting the blue sky. Her simple shoes, the only ones she owned, clicked against the granite floor of the lobby as she walked towards the elevators. On the 32nd floor, she was greeted by an elegant receptionist who led her through hallways with glass walls, where men and women in expensive suits talked on the phone about millions of dollars as if they were pennies. The world of investments, stocks. The stock market was completely foreign to her, but there was a determination in her eyes that did not go unnoticed. Her desk was in a room attached to the billionaire's main office, separated only by a glass wall that allowed them to see each other constantly during the day. In the early days, she felt like a fish out of water, trying to decipher financial terminology, organizing contracts and documents that moved unimaginable fortunes. He was patient, explaining each process with a kindness that contrasted with his reputation as a ruthless businessman. During these moments of instruction, Their hands occasionally touched when he pointed something out on paper, and an electric current seemed to run up her arm to her heart. She noticed how his eyes lingered on her face when he thought she wasn't looking, how his voice softened when he spoke to her. The tension in the atmosphere was almost palpable. Other employees began to comment on the unusual hiring, whispering through the corridors about the former cleaner who now organized million-dollar documents. She heard the comments and pretended they didn't affect her, but each word was like a jab at her still fragile self-esteem. "She won't last a month," the financial manager muttered to a colleague during break time. "It's obvious he only hired her out of pity, or for other, less noble reasons." The words reached the ex-cleaner's ears as she walked down the hallway carrying a stack of reports. Her eyes filled with tears, but she kept walking, her head held high with a dignity she was learning to cultivate again. She would not allow them to doubt her ability or her honor. In the afternoons, when the office traffic slowed down, he began to stay longer in her room, making excuses to review documents that she had already organized perfectly. Their conversations extended beyond what was necessary, evolving from professional instructions to personal confidences. "Why did you help me?" she asked one rainy afternoon, while organizing investment contracts in international funds. Curiosity had been stronger than prudence. He stopped typing and looked at her through the glass that separated their desks. "Because I recognize strength when I see it. You raised a daughter alone, worked 5 years without ever missing a day, kept your dignity even when they tried to humiliate you. That's more valuable than any expensive university degree." His words touched a deep place in her heart, a place that had been hurt so many times that she had thought it was dead. For the first time in years, someone saw value in her beyond her ability to clean or serve. The days turned into weeks, and an intimate routine was established between them. He always arrived with 2 coffees, leaving one on her desk without saying anything. She began to stay later to finish tasks that could be left for the next day, just to prolong the moments when they were alone in the silent office. The mutual attraction grew like a plant that receives water and sun, impossible to ignore. She noticed how he loosened his tie when they were alone, how his eyes scanned her face when she concentrated on her work, how his breathing changed when she approached to show him some document. One night, while organizing papers on investments in gold and cryptocurrencies, documents that represented more wealth than she could imagine, she felt a presence behind her. He was there, so close that she could feel the warmth of his body watching over her shoulder. "You're doing better than many employees I've hired with years of experience," he murmured, his husky voice close to her ear. She turned slowly, and suddenly they were face to face, separated by only a few inches. The air between them seemed electrified, charged with a tension that neither knew how to control anymore. Their eyes met and remained so for long seconds, as if time had stopped on the 32nd floor of that building. It was when the office door opened abruptly, breaking the moment like shattering glass. The main secretary entered with a stack of urgent documents, and the spell was broken. They moved away quickly, trying to disguise their embarrassment, but both knew that something had irrevocably changed between them. In the days that followed that interrupted moment, a different tension hung in the office air. He avoided being alone with her, keeping conversations strictly professional when other employees were around. She noticed the change and felt a pang of rejection that she tried to disguise by diving even deeper into work. It was during a particularly busy afternoon, with telephones ringing incessantly about movements on the stock exchange, that the first real twist happened. The former cleaner was organizing confidential documents about the family's assets when she found a folder that caught her attention. The name on the label made her freeze. It was the same as her former employer. Her hands trembled as she opened the file. Inside were old contracts, correspondence, and to her horror, photographs of herself working at the mansion, photos taken without her knowledge, in moments when she was distracted cleaning or tending the garden. At the bottom of each photo, handwritten notes described her routines, schedules, and even comments about her appearance. Her heart raced when she read a letter dated just 3 weeks ago. It was from her former employer to the billionaire, and the words jumped off the paper like knives. "My dear, I know you've always had a soft spot for the needy, but this time you've gone too far. Hiring that woman was a mistake that could be costly to the family's reputation. She doesn't belong in our world, and we all know it." Further down, the letter revealed something even more shocking. "As we know, our separation was just a necessary break. When you tire of this rebellious phase of Good Samaritan, I'll be here waiting. After all, we've already planned our wedding once, and nothing has really changed between us." Her hands were shaking so badly that she almost dropped the papers. The former employer was his ex-fiancée. The same cruel woman who had fired her in such a humiliating way was someone who still harbored romantic intentions towards the man she what? Loved? The word scared her, but it was impossible to deny what she felt growing in her heart with each passing day. She closed the folder quickly when she heard footsteps approaching. He entered the room with a worried expression, carrying a cup of coffee that had cooled in his hands. "Did something happen?" he asked, noticing the paleness of her face. "Nothing important," she lied, trying to hide the folder among other documents, but her hands were still shaking, and he noticed. "You're lying," he said, approaching her desk. "Your eyes look different when you lie. I've learned to notice that in the last few weeks." The intimate observation made her blush, but it also made her more nervous. How had he learned so much about her in such a short time? "It's just numbers, financial reports, nothing I can't handle." He didn't believe her, but he decided not to press the issue at the moment. Instead, he did something that caught her completely off guard. He reached out and gently touched her face, removing a tear that she hadn't even realized was falling. "You don't have to carry everything alone," he murmured, his blue eyes fixed on hers with an intensity that made her heart race dangerously. The touch was like fire on her skin. She closed her eyes involuntarily, allowing herself for a few seconds to feel that tenderness that she hadn't experienced for so long. When she opened them again, he was closer, so close that she could feel his warm breath on her face. "We can't," she whispered, but her voice came out without conviction. "Why not?" he asked, his voice husky with repressed desire. "Because I'm just a former cleaner, and you are." She paused, searching for the right words. "You own assets in Bitcoin, invest millions in stocks. You have a fortune I can't even comprehend. We live in different worlds." "That doesn't matter," he said, bringing his face closer to hers. "None of that matters." The kiss that followed was inevitable, like two forces of nature that finally meet. Soft at first, hesitant, but quickly it turned into something more urgent, more desperate. She felt his hands on her waist, pulling her closer, and her whole body responded with a need that frightened her. When they finally broke apart, both were breathless. She rested her forehead on his, trying to process what had happened. "This changes everything," she whispered. "It had already changed weeks ago," he replied, running his fingers through her hair, which she now wore loose at work, a small concession to femininity that he had subtly encouraged. In the weeks that followed, a secret passion blossomed between them. Meetings after work became common, when the office emptied and they could be alone. He taught her about investments and the financial market, but the lessons often turned into intimate conversations, confessions about dreams and fears, stolen kisses between the stacks of documents on investments in international funds. He spoke about the pressure of carrying the family legacy, about how he sometimes felt suffocated by the expectations of being the perfect heir. She shared the difficulties of being a single mother, the sacrifices she made for her daughter, the constant fear of not being good enough. "You are the bravest woman I know," he said one night when they stayed late reviewing contracts. "You raised a daughter alone, started life over from scratch, Didn't let yourself break even when they tried to humiliate you. Sometimes I don't feel brave, she admitted, nestled in his arms in the leather armchair of his office. Sometimes I feel like a fraud, pretending I can belong in this world. You belong wherever you want to be, he murmured against her hair. And I want you to be by my side. The happiness lasted until the day she came home and found her daughter feverish, struggling to breathe. The child, who was already fragile, had developed a persistent cough that worsened with each passing day. At the public hospital, after hours of waiting, the diagnosis came as a devastating blow. The girl needed specialized treatment, expensive tests, constant medical monitoring. "How much will it cost?" she asked the doctor, already knowing that she wouldn't be able to pay. The amount mentioned was astronomical by her standards, even with the new salary. It would be months of treatment, imported medications, consultations with specialists. She left the hospital carrying her daughter in her arms, feeling the weight of despair crushing her shoulders. It was that very night, while watching over her daughter coughing in the small apartment they rented in the suburbs, that the second twist arrived unexpectedly. A luxury car pulled up in front of the modest building, drawing the attention of curious neighbors. From the window, she saw a familiar figure getting out of the vehicle. Her former employer, elegant as always, but with an expression that mixed determination and malice. Her heart leaped when she realized the woman was coming towards her. The doorbell rang a few minutes later, and she opened the door with her daughter in her arms, still feverish and sleepy. "We need to talk," said the former employer, pushing the door open and entering without being invited. Her eyes scanned the small apartment with barely disguised disdain, from the simple furniture to the child's clothes drying on the makeshift clothesline in the living room. "What do you want?" asked the former cleaner, instinctively hugging her daughter more tightly. The woman smiled, but there was no warmth in that expression. "I want to make you an offer that will solve all your problems." She pulled a thick envelope from her expensive bag. "Here's enough money to pay for your daughter's entire treatment, plus a generous amount for you to settle in another city far from here." The envelope seemed to weigh tons in the young mother's trembling hands. "In exchange for what?" "You disappear from his life forever. No explanations, no dramatic farewells. Simply vanish as if you never existed." The envelope remained in her hands for long seconds, while her daughter coughed weakly in her arms. The money inside represented the difference between life and death for her child, but it also meant giving up the only man who had seen value in her wounded soul. "You have 24 hours to decide," said the former employer, adjusting her designer bag on her shoulder. "He'll never know about our conversation, of course. It will be our little secret." After the woman left, leaving behind only her expensive perfume and the weight of an impossible decision, the former cleaner collapsed into the chair in the small kitchen. She opened the envelope with trembling hands and almost fainted when she saw the amount. It was more money than she would earn in 10 years of work, enough to save her daughter and start a new life far away. But the price was her heart. She spent the night sleepless, watching her daughter's irregular breathing, weighing each option until her mind almost collapsed. When the sun rose, her decision was made. Her daughter was everything she had in the world, and she could not let her die out of pride or for a feeling that might not even have a future. The next morning, she didn't show up at the office. Instead, she left a simple letter on his desk, explaining that she had gotten a better job in another city and that it was better this way. She didn't mention her sick daughter, didn't talk about the money, didn't give any clue about the real reason for her departure. 6 months passed like centuries for both. She had moved to a smaller town, a few hundred miles from the city, where she rented a simple but clean apartment near the hospital where her daughter was receiving treatment. The blackmail money had been invested entirely in the child's health. Consultations with the best specialists, imported medications, detailed tests. The girl was responding well to the treatment, gaining weight and color in her previously pale cheeks. But the mother withered emotionally, working again as a cleaner in a commercial building, carrying her broken heart like a wound that refused to heal. Meanwhile, he had turned into a shadow of the man he was. He mobilized all the resources of his company to find them, hired private investigators, scoured employment records throughout the region. His fortune accumulated in investments and financial applications was useless if he could not find the only woman who had touched his soul. His family pressured him to forget that story and resume his relationship with his ex-fiancée, who had returned to frequent the social events of high society as if nothing had happened. She acted as if their relationship had never ended, appearing at family dinners, commenting on future plans that included marriage and merger of assets. "You need to be practical," his father said during a tense dinner at the mansion. "That woman disappeared without explanation. Obviously, she had no real interest in you, only in the money. Our family has a name to uphold." But he knew that there was something wrong with the story. He knew her eyes. He had felt the sincerity in every kiss, in every intimate conversation. It was not possible that everything had been faked. The reunion happened by chance, as the best moments in life often do. He had maintained his routine of making monthly donations to public hospitals in the region, a practice he had adopted years before to try to repay some of the privileges he had received. It was a job he made a point of following up on personally, checking how the resources were being applied. That Tuesday morning, he was visiting the hospital in a small town when he saw her. She was walking down the hallway towards the pediatrics department, carrying a bag with medicine and a tired but hopeful smile. Her daughter walked beside her, visibly stronger and healthier, but still too small for her age. The world stopped for a few seconds. She saw him too, and the shock in her eyes was like a punch to his stomach. She tried to hide behind a pillar, pulling her daughter by the hand, but it was too late. "No," he said, approaching with determined steps. "You're not running away from me again." "Please," she whispered, tears already streaming down her face. "Don't make this harder than it already is." "Hard?" His voice came out louder than he intended, making some people in the hospital look curious. "You disappeared from my life without explanation. I spent 6 months looking for you two. And now you tell me not to make things difficult." The daughter hid behind her mother's legs, frightened by the raised voice of the man she didn't know. He controlled himself immediately, bending down to be at the child's height. "Hi, little one," he said in a soft voice. "You are the daughter of the bravest woman I know." The girl looked at her mother, who nodded through her tears, and then smiled shyly at him. "Talk to me," he pleaded, standing up and meeting her eyes again. 5 minutes, that's all I ask." They sat on a bench in the hospital garden, their daughter playing a few feet away with a simple toy, under her mother's watchful eye. It was then that the whole truth came out like a dam breaking. She told him about her child's illness, about the despair, about the blackmail from his ex-fiancée. She spoke of sleepless nights, of how she had used every penny of the money to save her daughter, of how she died a little each day, away from him. "You should have come to me," he said, his voice choked with emotion. "I would have moved mountains to help you." "And that's exactly what she would use against you," she replied. "She would say I was taking advantage, that I was only after your money. She would destroy your reputation." "My reputation is worthless without you," he said, taking her hands in his. "These have been the 6 emptiest months of my life." It was at this moment that the third and biggest twist was revealed. While they were talking, he had discreetly called his assistant, asking to investigate recent financial movements of his ex-fiancée. The response came by message a few minutes later, and what he discovered made his blood run cold. "She wasn't just trying to separate us," he said, showing her his phone. "In the last 6 months, she forged my signatures, diverted company investments, manipulated documents. She was preparing a coup to take control of the family business. The former cleaner widened her eyes. How? She fabricated evidence that I was having an emotional breakdown because of you, that I was making irrational decisions, jeopardizing the family's assets. The plan was to declare me mentally incapable of managing the business and take control through a power of attorney she got from my mother. She remembered the documents she had seen that afternoon, the notes about her routine, the photographs. She had been watching me for a long time. Years, probably, waiting for an opportunity to use it against me. He squeezed her hands. But you can help us. You know her habits, you worked in the house, you know things you don't even realize you know. Together, they put together a plan. She had kept a key to the mansion by accident when she was fired, and she knew every corner of the house where the former employer kept her personal documents. With her help, he got enough evidence of the fraud, falsified contracts, records of unauthorized transactions, evidence that she had manipulated information to harm him. The final confrontation took place in his office, in the presence of the family's lawyers and the competent authorities. The ex-fiancé tried to deny everything, but the evidence was overwhelming. Her network of corruption and manipulation was completely exposed, and she faced not only imprisonment, but complete social ruin. "How did you find out?" she asked during the interrogation, still trying to maintain an arrogant posture even in handcuffs. "A former cleaner that you underestimated," he replied, looking at the woman he loved. "Someone you thought you could buy and discard, but who turned out to be smarter and more honest than you ever were." A year later, the story had been completed in a way that none of them could have imagined. The wedding was simple, held in the garden of a small church, far from the glamour of high society. Her daughter, now completely healed and radiant with health, scattered petals along the aisle as a flower girl, wearing a white dress that made her look like an angel. His family, initially resistant, had been won over not by wealth or status, but by her strength of character and the genuine love they saw in their son's eyes. The groom's mother cried during the ceremony, finally understanding that true value is not measured in wealth or lineage, but in dignity and courage. He had completely restructured his business, creating an investment fund to help single mothers and families in need. It was a way of honoring her journey and of using his fortune to change lives, not just accumulate wealth. "You taught me that true luxury isn't gold investments or dividends," he said during his speech at the wedding. "It's having someone who loves you for who you are, not for what you own." She was radiant in the simple but elegant dress, her loose hair adorned with simple flowers. When he kissed her, sealing the union, there were tears of happiness in the eyes of all those present, because everyone knew that they were witnessing not just a wedding, but the triumph of true love over all adversity. The small family moved to a cozy house, far from the cold mansion where it had all begun. It was a place full of life, laughter, and dreams come true, where a former cleaner had become not only the wife of a millionaire, but the queen of her own home, built with love, respect, and second chances. Love had overcome all prejudices, all social barriers, all attempts at destruction, and in the simplicity of that happiness, conquered with so much suffering, they found a wealth that no financial investment could ever provide. If you liked this wonderful story, please comment, giving a rating from 0 to 10. Your opinion is very important. And if you love beautiful stories, subscribe to my channel. I promise to make your day better with my videos.